Okay, so B'siyata D'Shmaya, jumping back into Torah, Dalet and Likutei Moharan. Yesterday, Rabbi Nachman gave us a very, very deep dive into the way in which a tzaddik can be batal, which gives that tzaddik the appellation Talmud Chacham, right? In the truest sense that we're speaking about, because Chachma is anivos, v'Chachma me'ayin timatzeh, what it means bittul, that enables that tzaddik to be such a person that after a person has seen the tzaddik, has been in the presence of such a tzaddik, and after the person has given tzedakah to the tzaddik, both of which akin to a torch and sunrise, based on the Gemara in Saita, that respectively enable a person to avoid the dangers of the pits and of the thorns and thistles, which is domim and someach, which is atzvus atzlus, domim, and taiva, someach, as well as enable a person to avoid the dangers of the listim and the chayis rois, which are chay and medaber, not in that order, right? The chay ra and the listim, which means those negative traits of devarim betelim and gaiva and arrogance, that after a person goes through that process of coming into the presence of the tzaddik, which is the torch, and giving tzedakah to the tzaddik, which is az yibaka kashachar oirecha, right, which is an aspect of daybreak, dawn, then a person comes to prashas drachim, which the Gemara in Saita itself interpreted as Talmud Chacham v'yayim hamisa. And Rabbi Nachman darshans that as meaning vidoy, because kol hamumasim misvadim, vidoy lefnei Talmud Chacham, where a person goes through their process of dealing with their stuff in the presence of a shining orb of really radiating divine light, that from that place a person is able to get rid of all their tzirufim ra'im, which is the bechina of malchus, the sitra achor, the bechina of bal pa'ar, right, shepoyer piv, which is the opposite of malchus peh, that the world is supposed to be a place that's, the whole world is illuminated with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, Tar Eretz Mechvedecha, and through that, a person is able to come to Malchus, to Kedusha, where they come to realize that Kol Mada Avid Rachman L'Tavavich, Kol Moiroisav, is actually Hem L'Tavasai, which is the ultimate Malchus to Kedusha. Person realizes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running my life, not just in the realm of time, not just in the realm of space, but also in the realm of time. In every single thing that a person went through, both the positive, as well as the negative, the ups and as well as the downs, the aliyahs and geridas, a person's able to realize shekal ma'arosav hem l'tavasai. Usually, interestingly enough, because that's what actually compels the person into the presence of a tzaddik in the first place, right? And sometimes, just like again, I think therapy and that therapeutic experience is a lesser mushal for this, right? In an ultimate sense, because this is way beyond that. But I think it's a good mushal where sometimes people who are compelled because of difficult life circumstances into therapeutic processes end up learning and gaining much more than regular people who don't go through shviras, who don't hit rock bottom, who don't have to go, to groups and center their lives around spiritual development and so on. It's a similar kind of concept, but on a much broader, deeper, higher level, because what we get from the tzaddik is infinitely more, right, spiritually speaking, than we're going to get from emotional development, because it's with Kudsha B'richu, and it's also with MS, and it's also with Torah, and so it's something else. It's always a fascinating conversation, the overlap between, where does mental health or really like emotional health stop, and where does spiritual health take over? What is the chiluk between a rebbe and a therapist, and how do you navigate that? I think that's an incredibly important conversation, because of course both have a little bit of both. A real rebbe is supposed to be a bit of a therapist, and how could a therapist heal a person's nefesh if a person's not relating to the spirituality in the person? A person's not, they call it mental health. A person's not a brain, even emotional health. A person's not their emotions. A person's their nefesh. And that means that anything that's coming forth in a person's life is rooted in the nefesh, So it has to be a little bit of an interplay where Chachma b'gayim tamin, Torah b'gayim al tamin, and achitov, if you have therapists, which we have more and more of, who are drawing from the Hasidim, or drawing from the tzaddikim, and then are able to put the two together in the most wonderful way. Some of my closest friends it's very interesting. It's that this sort of sub-sect, this community of what they call neo-Hasidim, or Hasidim who are not really Hasidim, but are people who are getting into Hasidus, I think have a disproportionate amount of therapists as part of our rabbinical ranks. And just think off the top of my head of Yaakov Danishevsky, of Joey Rosenfeld, or Menachem Poznansky, different people who are in this space, who are known both for their hashpon in Pnimiyas Torah, as well as their sitting with people, and they become Rofei Nefesh. And it's an interesting thing. So the Rebbe explained that how does a tzaddik get to that place where they're mamish the bechina of the ish chacham yichaprena, where they have this capacity by way of their chachma, which is v'chachma me'ayin timatzeh, which is the bechina of oiver al pesha lishe eris lemishamesam atzma kishe, right? How does a person get to that madrega? Well, the Rebbe says, well, how do you get out of that madrega? What's the opposite of a person who's batal? Is a person who's living in a chaimer, a person who's living in the realm of differentiation, multiplicity, duality, separateness from the divine. And that, says the Rebbe, is produced because of Oisios, where Oisios, each and every letter of the Aleph Beis, contains a different form, different surah. That's the shirish of individuality. But the only reason that they look that way is because that's the Ratzon of Hashem, that they should look that way. Which means that just like sunlight shines down and it reflects on different buildings and different structures and different angles, but it's all one sunlight, so too, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will is reflected ultimately in this realm, which could be taken on surface as a place that hides God's light, that is the mask or concealment that prevents a person from seeing oneness. On the contrary, a person can come to see a world that was created with Oisios, which was created with Giburim, as actually being just different vessels, different kelim, for the undifferentiated will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that comes down into a person's life, both latav, both lamutav, chas v'shalom, in a way of Ba'Hashem halal davar and Belikim halal davar, Chesed u'mishpat ashira, and that was David HaMelech's consciousness. David HaMelech being Malchus, the kedusha. Right? That's how David HaMelech lived, and that's why David's life was a whole, just tremendous experience of ups and downs and music and war and running and settled and learning and killing and this was David's life, because David HaMelech is showing how really every stream and strand and energy and aspect of a person's experience is all drawing on Ratzon Hashem, and the ultimate expression of that is tshuva, which David HaMelech becomes the master of tshuva. The Gemara tells us, which we learned with some of the Chevra, why did David HaMelech do that, experience that sin, whatever it is, on his level with Bathsheba, is in order kedei lahayres tshuva liyachid. David HaMelech is the ultimate paradigm of a person who goes through negative stuff, and then through tshuva is able to turn around and realize that kol ha'avonos nasalai kizchuya. So it was actually all part of the process that's called living with das, chasadim, and gevuras, bound up as one. So a tzaddik, who's this aspect of the chacham, is a person who's able to live in the world of differentiation, but rise up and lift even his own or her own soul from the standpoint of them experiencing that as a separate consciousness, back up into the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We spoke about different techniques, both spiritual, Kabbalistic techniques, emotional techniques, even some physical techniques that enable the person to go to that place. And then once a person's in that place, they're able to draw down from that place this absolute knowledge, right? Via Data Hayoim, as Moshe Rabbeinu, who's the Spitz Talmud Chacham in this sense, is able to bring down to Klal Yisrael, V'hashivoisa el levavecha ki Hashem hu ha'elikim. Hashem midas harachamim, elikim midas adin, oto davar. Why Moshe? Because Moshe was v'ish Moshe anamoid mikol adam anachnu ma. Moshe Rabbeinu was absolutely batal. He was able to rise out of this realm of Oisios and go up, and from there he was able to draw down this consciousness, this das, not just in a way of emunah, but in a way of absolutely clear seichel. And Reb Nachman said, and it was what we learned yesterday, that this was true in Moshe Rabbeinu's death. Vayikbar Begai, they buried him in the valley. Valley is humility, right? In Vayikbar Begai, the Eretz Moav. Eretz is Malchus. Moav, David HaMelech comes from Moav. Mul, Beis Pa'ar. Beis Pa'ar, like we said, is Pa'ar Piv. Mul Beis Pa'ar is that Moshe Rabbeinu, the tzaddik, is able to counter the Malchus, the Sitra Achra of Beis Pa'ar, of those Oisios, of the Averis that are chakuk on a person's bones. He's able to contrast that, draw them out, rearrange the tzirufim, put it back where it belongs, and everything is yofi and beautiful. Let's continue. And here we begin. We are on page Dalet Amud Beis, toward the end of Torah Dalet. And the Rebbe wants to show how all of what we've discussed is hidden, is hinted to in a mimer from Rabbi Bar Chana. As we said, the first 16 lessons are commentaries on Rabbi Bar Chana's visions at sea. And the Rebbe says, this is an explanation of Rabbi Bar Chana. Zimna chada habakazlina besvinta. One time I was traveling on a boat, v'chazina nahayi kavra, and I saw a gigantic fish, diyasvele Achlatina bu'usye. So take a look at the Rashbam. Kaver is a dog. Achlatina is a sheretz katan. There was a small sheretz, like a little insect, was going bu'usye ben chirav shel dog nichnas hasheretz. And this huge fish. Actually, it doesn't say how big it is. We're going to see in a minute how tremendous it was. Gigantic fish. And in the nostril, the fish is going a sheretz. Now, it says, V'itchuhu maya. Rabbi Nachman is going to use a different girsa that says, umesa. It died. And really, it's mavur in the Rashbam that it died. Idchu maya. The water pushes it to the dry land. Look at Rashbam on the side. Idichu hamayim v'yishlichu li habasha. The water pushed him out, and it pushed it onto the dry land. Kederech yam she'ina sayvel davar mace. Right, so you see that it died. Right, and the ocean, is always pushing all the corpses. Anybody's shipwreck, the bodies wash up on shore because the water is not sayvel davar mace. Berditch Barav has an incredible piece on that. Agav, actually in this week's parsha, dealing with the with Chris Yamsov. V'shadyu leguda, and it compelled this huge corpse of the fish leguda to the boundary, to the border, and it fell on top of 60 cities, and it just destroyed them. Now, once you have this huge fish there, people are going to take advantage of it, and so 60 other cities came, and they ate. They ate from its meat, from its flesh. Then 60 other cities came, and they had salted fish from it. Look at Rashbam. It cast this fish upon 60 cities, and it destroyed them. Gigantic fish. While it was still just recently dead, right? And so it was like fresh, and so they ate right away from it. 60 other cities came, that came from a distant place, and they salted this fish, and they carried it back to their place. From one of its eye sockets, look at the Rashbam, they took 300 buckets of oil just from one eye socket of this fish. Right? Have you ever read like Moby Dick as a kid? The whalers are going for the oil, and so they from one eye socket of this fish, they took 300 buckets of oil, and then Chazinan says Rabbi Baruch Chana, when I returned after 12 months, they were like sort of carving out from its bones. They were using the bones of the fish to rebuild the 60 cities that had been destroyed originally when this fish was cast out of the water and onto the 60 homes. They were using the fish's bones itself to rebuild those cities. What is going on here, right? What a story. So Rabbi Nachman decodes it for us. Perish, this means Sfina Lashon Chashivos. Sfina, we already had this in Torah Aleph, right? Sfina is a Lashon Safon v'chashav. Over there he was speaking about the Chen v'chashiva shel Yisrael. Lashon Chashivos b'chinas Malchus, gezumt and stark, which is an aspect of Malchus. Rabbi Baruch Chana was contemplating in his mind this concept of Malchus, Eich B'nei Yisrael Malonisa. What's going to be with Malchus? What's going to be with Kodesh Baruch Hu? I was just learning yesterday from the Zohar Parshas Bereishis. The Zohar Kodesh has this whole paragraph, you wouldn't believe it. And he says, "Ben asale ezer kenegdai." He says, you know what kenegdai is? You have to learn this to believe it. And so we don't learn it because we don't learn Zohar, but we have to learn Zohar because the Zohar is talking to the people who don't learn Zohar. So I have to learn it. That was his main audience. He says, you know what, Ezer Kenegdai, I wouldn't say it with my own mouth if I didn't see it inside. I could show anybody if you want. He says, Kenegdai are Talmidei Chachamim who only learn Gemara. He says they're Keneged Hashem, the Zohar says. Because they're not focusing on elevating the Shechina. That's elevated through Pnimius HaTorah. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, why can't you be an Ezer for me? Kadosh Baruch Hu goes around the world looking. He says, does anybody care about the Shechina? Or we're happy with our big siyum and the theater is like, the Shechina's in Galus. It's not about our own learning, our own to care. Rabbi Baruch Chana is gewalt, like he's sitting and he's contemplating, he's thinking about the Shechina. How are we gonna elevate and rectify the Shechina? Malchus is sunk into the dumps. How do we fix this? So he says, he says, I saw this fish, Yisrael mechunim b'shem dagim. This is a reference to Am Yisrael, who are called dagim k'mayshikasav yidgelu raiv b'kerev haaretz. And this connects very nicely if you want to really make an abstract connection. We said in Torah days that every tzaddik is called a dag. Okay, v'amich kulam tzaddikim. So all of the Am Yisrael, the tzaddik is called a dag, and the whole Jewish nation is in a certain sense a nation of tzaddikim. We're also called dagim v'yidgelu raiv b'kerev haaretz. The yasvale achlatina b'nechir. What does this mean? The yasvale achlatina b'nechir, of a small sheret was going into his nose. Says the Rebbe, Zebechinas tfilasan shel Yisrael. This is the aspect of the prayers of the Jewish nation. Kamashakasav silasi echtam lach, also from Torah days, that tefillah is connected very much to the nose. And shenesariv sheret hainu tuma b'tfilasai va'avadasai ubilbalaisai. A person was davening, and a sheret came into the nose, means into the tefillah. Something was mevalbel him, some kind of thought of tuma that was recurring, some kind of bittul tefillah that he wasn't able to daven properly. He wasn't able to serve Hashem properly. So what did he do? What are you going to do when you can't daven properly? Imagine a person's whole life, and they can't connect. They can't connect. Okay, that's okay not to be able to connect. What are you going to do about it? Where is there a doctor that I can go to who's going to help me diagnose my spiritual illness? Most people don't know doctors exist. HaKadosh Baruch Hu put tzaddikim in the world. This week's parsha, Vayaminu b'Hashem, u'v'moshe avdai. Like in the same pasuk, the tzaddik in Jewish tradition, not just by the Hasidim. The Hasidim brought back this concept, but our whole tradition comes through tzaddikim. We don't have Torah without Moshe Rabbeinu. We don't have anything without Moshe Rabbeinu. Our whole tradition comes through the tzaddik, and we have to develop a very healthy approach to the tzaddik, obviously to keep Hashem as Hashem, and interact with the tzaddik just mamish as a shliach. And in order for the tzaddik to be a shliach, like we mentioned a few days ago, Rabbi Nachman's telling us the prerequisite, the precondition for being this kind of tzaddik is a nivus kol kach. That person should never able to make a mistake of thinking, that they start to worship or idolize the tzaddik and forget about Hashem. Chas v'shalom. That's the tzaddik's job, to make sure that never ever happens. Keep the main thing mamish the main thing, and that's the most important part of sort of qualifying to take this role as the soul doctor. But you have to look for a soul doctor. But the only way to look for a soul doctor is if a person feels like they're missing something. I mentioned also, I think I mentioned it in this context, but I've certainly mentioned it previously. The Rabbi Nachman says I can only help a person who comes to me and tells me what he lacks. Right? And in another place, Rabbi Nachman says that the minute somebody walked into his presence, he was able to know everything about the person, mikaf regav ad rosh, the whole person's history and everything about the person. Stira, not a stira. Because it's not about Rabbi Nachman needing to know what you need. It's about you needing to know that you need. Otherwise, Breslau will just become something where a person learns it. It's fascinating, it's interesting. Like big academics studying Hasidus become big, academics and professors in theology. Like, this is not the point. The point is to approach it with humility, to recognize, Gewalt, I'm searching, I'm seeking. Torah isn't something that you just onboard from the standpoint of intellectualism. Torah is something that we hold onto because Eitz Chaim Hila Machazikim, because I feel like I'm drowning and I need something to keep me afloat. That's how a person comes to the tzaddik. So that's how Rabbi Nachman is describing here. He couldn't serve Hashem properly. And this is again what compelled the whole first generation of Hasidim, who were not Hasidish, because there was no Hasidus. That's what made them special. That's what gave them access to the Ar of the Baal Shem, because they felt a chisaron. And they were willing to be honest with themselves. And they were willing to take a look at their life and say, this ain't really working, Like, it's just not. I'm not getting to where I need to go. And if I'm being honest with myself, I haven't really moved. I haven't really budged. And life is passing by. And many. And then they traveled. And then Rav Nosson, stands up and he travels, to from tzaddik to tzaddik to tzaddik, the Neshchazer and the Berditchever, and who wasn't he by, until he found his Sherish Neshama. Ma asa ish hazeh. So what does this person do? Asa shalosh bechinas hanal. He finds a soul doctor at tzaddik, and he immediately does these three things. Hainu eskashers l'tzaddik. He binds himself first, builds a relationship with the tzaddik. Ubechina unesinas tzedakah. He begins to support the tzaddik. He's really in, right? He's not just there coming to Thursday night chabura, once in a while. He's in, So a person's in. He supports. He puts money. He identifies with this. This is my whole life. And vidu dvarim. And finally, he's able to unburden himself in the presence of the tzaddik before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'zeh perish, says Rabbi Nachman, that's what's being hinted to here. Rabbi Barchano meisa v'yitchu mai v'shediu leguda. His girshalish bechinas me'ela l'sata. Rabbi Barchana is hinting to us these three levels. Me'ela l'sata, first beginning by the highest madrega, which is vidu dvarim, then working his way back to tzedakah, and then finally re'iyas hatzaddik. U'meisa. Again, Rabbi Nachman is using that different girsa that it says umesa. Zebachinas v'yidoy dvarim. Right, that's the first thing. What did he do? Umesa. Right, it's chu maya v'shediu leguda umesa k'maisha amru kala mumasim isvadim. So that's the first thing, is that it's vidoy umesa. V'idchu maya, and then the water pushed him out. Zebachinas tzedakah. K'maishikasav shlach lach mechal pnei amayim. Right, cast your bread upon the waters. Why? Because in many days it will return to you, and that's a bechina. The Mefarshim explain giving tzedakah. Uksiv, and another pasuk in Yeshayahu referring to tzedakah says, Ashreichem zoyrei al kol mayim. Fortunate are those of you who plant on the water. Why? Because the water will push it back. So v'yitchu maya, the water pushing out this kavra, this Ishi Yisraeli who did meso, did vidoy, is the bechina of giving tzedakah to the tzaddik. It pushes it back because shlach lach mechal pnei hamayim, and b'roiv yamim it will return. V'shadiu leguda, and then the first madrega is he shadiu leguda. He approached the geder. What's a geder? Is a tzaddik. Hat tzaddik nikra guda. The tzaddik is also good. That's also true. The tzaddik is mamash a good yid. But it's a guda. Lashon gader. The tzaddik is boundary setting. Shuhu gader pertzoseim shal Yisrael, because the Gemara says, based on psukim in Yecheskel and Yeshayahu, that tzaddik is always setting boundaries. And that's crucially important. The person wants to know, what is the tzaddik going to give me? The tzaddik is not there to give you anything that the Torah isn't already giving you. The tzaddik is there to help guide you, to place frameworks and sort of signposts and gedarim to help funnel the person in the way that person needs to be funneled. We're going to learn much later, in a year from now, a year and a half from now. Ezra Hashem in Yerushalayim, Torah of Zion and Tinyana, Rabbi Nachman speaks about how the tzaddik has to be a bechina of ish asher ruach boy, that Rashi tells us. So they're speaking about Yeshua, that Yodea lahalach neged ruchai shall kol echad v'echad. The tzaddik needs to be able to relate to every single person where that person's at, and to give that person what they need. And sometimes the tzaddik will give two people, one after the other, opposite messages. To one person, he's going to give tremendous chizuk because the person is sinking down in the dumps and needs to know that God is still with them. That's called hasagas maloi, maloi chala aretz kavoida, like God is with you. And to the next person, the tzaddik is mamish, going to tell the person, what are you doing with your life? What do you think? You're close to God? You know how many madregas there are? Like we haven't even begun to begin. We don't know what Torah is to think that we know Torah. And that's the job of the tzaddik. Lahalech neged ruchai shall kol echad v'echad. The tzaddik is gader pertzoseim. The tzaddik helps us to build frameworks for ourselves, to figure out, like, where am I? Give me a map. Show me where I currently am. What cluster of Chazal is relevant to me in this moment? Because Chazal is not just when we say Chazal. You have to know, Chazal is like a piano. You have to know what buttons to press, when. There's a lot of different contradictory elements, especially in Ashkafas Chazal. Who are you pressing? Rav or Shmuel, or Rabbi Kiva or Rabbi Shmuel? At which point? These are different traditions. Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai, Mamish, right? Yerushalmi, Bavli, because these are two completely different traditions, and they've become part of the Jewish consciousness that now in today's Dar Malakdim, we have to draw from everything, but you have to know when and where and how. And the tzaddik is able to guide a person in such a way.
Good also means good asek is long. It's kind of like the opposite in a way.
To bridge.
It's the other side of the same coin, that he can see the bigger picture. Good asek.
Stretches out. Beautiful. So here the Rebbe says, Gadar shuhu gaider pertzoseim shal Yisrael. So then, you know what happens, says the Rebbe, V'charav mina shitim v'chayzeh. That destroys 60 houses. What does this mean? Because Umeis, right, it died, and then the water pushed it out, and it landed on these 60 cities. This is a reference to the removal of Malchus from the Sitra Achra. How does that work? We're going to see in a minute. Because again, prashas drachim, that tzaddik is giving that person a derech, how to look at themselves. And again, Likutei Moharan is this. Just like Tanya was written as a yechidus, Likutei Moharan is mamish. It's a yechidus. But it's not a derech klusha l'rabbim. Likutei Moharan will give you what you need, and it's sort of like a self-training. It's okay. We're talking about fish. Give a man a fish, teach a man to fish. The Rebbe is teaching you to fish. He's teaching you how to be the fish. He's teaching you how to be the tzaddik for your own self. You onboard this consciousness, no matter what you're going through in life. You have a Torah to take from. You know where you're at. It's a klalius gadol. Likutei Moharan is a klalius gadol. Like we learned, I think, in the Akdama. It's relevant for every single person on their level. That every Torah is filled with eitzah. Sometimes you'll need this Torah. Sometimes you'll need that Torah. The whole thing is a pharmacy. And you'll be able to self-diagnose, but it's not self-diagnosing. A person lives with the consciousness, with the das of the tzaddik. And the tzaddik is directing the person in the proper path with clarity. Harim ugvais, I'm going to destroy Harim ugvais, mountains and valleys. Ramaz al Churban Memshelas Ha'akum, that's a reference to the destruction of Malchus to Sitra Achra, which is the aspect of the four Galuyos, Raimi, Bavel, Yavan, Madai, Rabim, Aimrim, Lanafshi, Ein Yeshua, Belikim Sela. That's the Rosh Hashanah's Rabim, Mayim, Rabim, La Yuchlil Chabes Sahava, Rabim. Anytime you see Rabim, it's the klalius of the Malchus of the Sitra Achra that's coming to tell a person there's no hope. Coming to tell a person to live in a realm of pure, sort of reductionist, materialist, rational nothingness, and you're stuck. And this world is what you see, and what you see is what you get, and that's it. And the Rebbe says that in Torah Aleph, when a person is able to connect that levana, which could be disconnected from the sun and therefore completely dark, and it begins to reflect the light of the sun. So Rabbi Nachman says that a person's living with Malchus to Kedusha, Ki'isha Yisraeli Tzarech Tamad L'Stakal B'Seichel Sheish B'Chal Davar, and so on, seeing HaKadosh Baruch Hu in everything. Then, what did the Rebbe say? Ki ha'chachma hu or gadol shemeir loy b'chol drachav, right? K'may shekasav chachmas adam ta'ir panav. Right, so sometimes it isn't just that the tzaddik is giving a person direction in terms of what path to take, but even the fact that there's a path. The tzaddik is showing you there's a path. You can move. You can really grow. You can really, really grow. Yiddishkeit is not limited to the ceiling that you think it's limited by. There's way, way, way higher madrigas, deeper madrigas that expands our horizons. What tefillin could be, what Shabbos could be, like things you never would have even known. There's a derech, there's a path. Sometimes it may be facetiously, because it's certainly not pashut pshat. But I think when we look at the famous teaching from Rabbeinu HaKadosh, which is in Likutei Moharan Tanyana Torah Memches, where the Rebbe says, really, Kala Olam, right, but it's not really Kala Olam. That became like the famous song Kala Olam Kula Gesher Tsar. But the Rebbe says, Da Kitzarach Adam Lavar B'Zeh Olam B'Gesher Tsar Ma'oid Ma'oid Va'Klal Va'Ikar as Lo Lehispachet Klal. That's the actual lashon, not the song. The song popularized it. It would be harder to fit all those words into that tune. I tried, it doesn't work, right? So whatever, it's good. Tzimtzum. So on a simple level, what does it mean? Don't be afraid that even though the bridge is so narrow, still, yes, it's narrow, but you're going to do it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you strength. The main thing is not to be afraid, and anybody knows, practically, if you're on a very small, narrow, string bridge, if you start freaking out, then you really, you should freak out, because then the whole thing starts shaking, and then it's mamish dangerous. The message is on a tightrope, not that I've ever walked a tightrope or anything like that, but I can imagine, just calm, slow, steady. If you start worrying, it's very dangerous. That's what it means, I'll be pshat. But I think no. I think yes, but I also think maybe it's possible on some level that the Rebbe is saying, you know why not to be afraid? Not because the bridge is narrow, and even though the bridge is narrow, don't be afraid. But Gewalt, there's a bridge bichlal. Kitzarech Adam laver b'zeh olam al gesher tsar ma'od v'aklav ve'ikr lo lefached. Because you know what the real pachad is? When I'm standing on one shore and I need to reach the other place and there's no bridge. That's scary. And the Rebbe says, okay, it's a narrow bridge, but kavalt, it's a bridge. There's a derech. The tzaddik is showing you there's a derech. Chachmas Adam tar panav, tar lefanav. Oirach tzadikim kar noiga hoilich var nachon hayoyim. There's an oirach, there's an or ches. You can find the or of ches, of chachma, of seichel, of Yaakov Avinu. You can find it down here in the malchus. Gewalt. That's what the tzaddik's showing a person. Changes your life. Mamish changes your life. So the tzaddik is coming lahoyers leiderach yashar achruv harim ugvayis remez al churban memshelas ha'akum. The removal of the influence of the Sitra Achra. And the end of the pasuk is that in destroying Haram Ukvayis, I guided Ibrim, those who are blind, on a path that they never would have known otherwise. We're blind, we're absolutely blind. And then, Pekeach Ibrim, person discovers this whole realm of Torah, changes a person's life. I recently sat with somebody that this person is brilliant person and has seen a lot of Torah and is feeling such a level of stagnation and sort of boredom and like mamish bumping up against the ceiling of Yiddishkeit. Like, I've been there, done that, I've seen this, I've seen that. And he goes on and on and on telling me about how all the Gemara that he's learned and all of this, and he excelled and I went to this yeshiva and that yeshiva, and he stops talking and I smile at him and I says, can you list me the 10 spheres? Height is one of them, I think. Rachamim? No, not Rachamim. I think Malchus is the first, Mamish. And I said, okay, Baruchim Abayim. You haven't learned everything. There's a whole area of Torah that contains everything that we need that we're pashut not giving to people. It's a pele atzum. You chap that the things that we take to be simple at this point, the way that we think about Yud Ke Vav Ke, we're familiar a little bit with basics. I keep on saying they're basics. This is not university stuff. This is the basics of Yiddishkeit. Roiv from Jews who are sweet and delicious, and we love them, and we appreciate them, and we respect them, through no fault of their own, will never ever experience this. And to Chevra who have experienced this, whose eyes are open, it's like, what a chaval! You go to one of the local shuls, Again, it's not a matter of judgment. It's a matter of like Moshe Rabbeinu. Mi'etin kol am Hashem neviim. What's Moshe was judgmental? Moshe Rabbeinu had a heart of the whole Klal Yisrael. He wanted that Mamish Yidden should be Yidden. And you see Jews, walking in, walking out, and it's like, what we have, who we are. I was walking with a bacher yesterday. I came back. I was saying lots of stories because we're already an Amud behind. I just want to, get back to the Amud. But I was walking back yesterday from work, which I don't have work, and nor do I ever walk back from it and finish it. And he says, "How was your day?" I said, "What day?" It's smack in the middle. There's no. The day's not over. When it's dark and you walk home. Not with this Baruch Hashem's life. And so I was sort of telling him. I said, so he told me. He said to a rabbi, the work never ends. I said, not to a rabbi, the work never ends. I said, to a kohen, the work never ends. He said, "Oh, you're a kohen? Like, what are you talking about?" I said, "No, I'm a Yisraeli." I said, "Are you a kohen?" He said, "No, I'm a Yisraeli." I said, "Well, guess what? We're both kohanim, because the pasuk says, "Mamlechas kohanim v'goy kadosh," and there is no lay people in Judaism. This is a total shtus. There are no lay people. You're a kohen, klap of the whole world. I told him, I said, "I'm on a mission." I said, "You're also on a mission, but how could we be on a mission if we don't know what our mission is?" I said, "Do you know your mission?" He said, I'm trying to figure it out. You're a teenager, a sweet boy. I said, I don't mean your personal mission. I mean, like, generally our mission. He's like, "No, I'm so sorry. I gotta go have a chavrusa." And he goes into the shul and he goes and sits down and learns Baba Basra. What the heck? You'll forgive me. What is going on? What is going on? These are ma'asim sha'ayim. I sit ma'asim b'chol yom with people. This is what I do for a living. I'm telling you the degree of, it's ignorance, but it's not because they're ignorant. I was also ignorant. We're all ignorant. It's the best kept secret of Yiddishkeit. And maybe it was supposed to be kept a secret. Not anymore. It can't be. It can't, because people are suffering. And we have the medicine. And we could give it to them. It's here. We have it. Ki karav elecha hadavar ma'od. It's here. And all of it, I think I'm just stressing this because all of us, whether you're here in person, whether you're listening to this, or you're going to listen to the recording on Spotify, on YouTube, Baruch Hashem, hundreds of people, you have to recognize each and every one of you and myself. We did not have the privilege of coming to this tzaddik and to Klal Chasidim and Klal Pnimiyus HaTorah, all of it, so that we should take it for ourselves, onboard it, get inspired, maybe hopefully allow it to suffuse in our families, and suffice with that. We are all pioneers. It's just klape, the klal. This is mamish, nothing started. When you talk about numbers and you think about institutions and you think about organizations and you think nothing. This is cute and a little smattering and a sparkling and a couple of things. It requires every person who feels grateful for what these teachings have done for them to bring it to someone else. Period. I can't stress this enough. There's nothing special about me. I'm a regular person. We are regular people. It's just from a young age, the minute that I learned it, I said to myself, how could other people can benefit from this? And that's how I started writing. And I did a Parsha newsletter, and then it became Sparks for B'ditchev, and then I was already a whole author, and then I said, wow, I can write something. And then I learned Torah Aleph, and I said, Gaval, Torah Aleph changed my whole life. I always tell people, if I was stuck on an island, I could only take one piece of Torah with me. Take Torah Aleph, it's everything you need. Yaakov, Esav, Yetzer Tov, Yetzer Hara, Chachma, Malchus, If only we gave Torah Aleph in high schools for 4 years long and did nothing else but Torah Aleph, it would already change the game. And then Kiruv organizations don't get me started. They're teaching the same 5 classes from Esha Torah in the 1980s. It's crazy. It's crazy. I'm telling you, because we're working in this realm, and I'm privileged enough to interface with the people who they don't have content. And it's like, you don't have content? Like, this is one book. Likutei Halachos, 8 volumes. Das Amok. This is not relationships, Jewish ancient wisdom for, men and women and Venus and Mars, whatever. It's like all this stuff, or Jewish mindfulness. It's not what it is. We have our own system of wisdom that no wisdom system in the world claims to even begin to have an inkling of an ounce of. This is ours. This is our emunah. This is our Torah. This is what makes us Yidden. This is what we need to bring to the world. And every single person, I really deeply believe, needs to find a way to spread it. Find a way. It could be a small way. It doesn't have to be a big way, but a small way. You take one person in your life who you think might be going through something or might be interested, and you make a chavrusa with them. It takes a half hour. You can change someone's life. It's not going to be about you, because you are just as unremarkable as me. Or we're all as remarkable as each other, relatively. We're just regular people. But what we're channeling is not regular at all. What we're channeling is not regular, and it works. And everybody wants something that works. And I know what works, because I've been doing this for a long time now. And it works. It mamish works. Effective. Time and time again. Easily, within a couple of sessions, you open someone's eyes. You don't have to start with proof for God's existence and permission to believe and this and all this stuff. You just sit them in front of God. You sit them in front of an experience of godliness, which is to see the truth and the coherence of the Torah. And it isn't evidence from the standpoint of proof, but it's anecdotal evidence that overwhelms the person when all of a sudden every single thing that they knew about their own life, about the world, and about Judaism falls into a perfectly coherent system that that aligns across every single layer and level of our tradition and of the human tradition and history and geography. And it's like, okay, I'm in. Amen. Amen.
Sure.
Says the Rebbe, this is the Nakuda, right? See, he says this is what it means. You get rid of the Malchus and Meshelas HaAkum. Blind people are opening their eyes. There's a new path. And that tzaddik is able to guide that person, show him something new. This is what it means, prashas drachim. These 60 cities, that after the Kavra came and it destroyed the 60 cities, those 60 cities is Malchus. Diksiv ba shishim Hema Melachos. It says in SHIURIM there were 60 queens, but Malchus is connected to the concept of Shishim. One of the reasons that Malchus is connected to Shishim is because Malchus is a receptacle, right, for the 6 spheres from Chesed down to Yesod, each of which is Kol from Esser spheres, and so it holds 60, right? So Malchus is always connected to 60. It's the receptacle for the 60 energies that are coming down from the 6 spheres Halyainus. Let's finish up. This is Ramaz al Shnei B'Desrai Shel Chai Medaber. Going back to the Gemara in Saita, that itself is a reflection of everything that Rabbi Nachman taught. Why? Because those 2 midas of Chai and Medaber, how are they rectified? Through tzedakah. Why? Because tzedakah rectifies aniyus. And aniyus is what's going to happen to a person who's connected to Dvarim B'Telim and Gaiva, like the Rebbe already proved. So ba'achlu min al-shittim echayzeh al yedei tzedakah mesaka noisavi yamshich shefa. Oh, they ate from it because the tzedakah came back that they planted, right? Because it was they put it into the yam, shlach lach mechapanei hamayim, and then itchu maya, right? And it pushed it back, gevalt. So they ate from it. V'zeh achlu minah v'shittim echayzeh. This is also an aspect of parnasa. Remez al b'china shishim gibayrim shemisham ba'parnasa. Also in SHIURIM, there's a reference to Shlomo Melech having 60 gibayrim, 60 very strong people to Krishma Shalamita, Savivla, that were standing around him to protect him. Why is gibayrim connected to parnasa? Kamashikasa, the Gemara in Tainis, right? We call it Gevuras Geshamim. Gevuras Geshamim. Geshem, Geshamim. Parnasa, coming down from Shemayim, is connected to Gevura. This is the aspect of domim and someach being fixed, which is atzlos and taiva al yidei kirvas el tzaddik, through coming close to the tzaddik. And why is that hinted to? That 60 cities salted meat from there, salted fish. Fish is not called meat, is it? Keep on saying meat, and it doesn't. Yeah, can you call it meat? Not really. Chilukei Deis here, okay, you'll find it out afterwards. Because the tzaddik is called bris melach olam. He's called the covenant, the eternal covenant of salt. In early sources, in Chazal, in Kabbalah, the tzaddik is called bris melach olam. Gam atzvus v'taiva is ba'im midamim achurim. And where does taiva and atzvus come from? Which is daimim tzameach, which is pchasam and kaitzim. Where do they come from? From the blood that's in a person. We're going to learn about Ezras Hashem at the beginning of next week. Torah Vav, unbelievable. Torah Vav. You got to buckle yourselves in already for Torah Vav. Daimim achurim. It comes from blood that's not settled. Al yidei melach poilet hadamim aram. What does salting do? Right? Why do we salt an animal? Is to get rid of all the blood. So they salted it, meaning they got rid of all the dam that's causing the atzvus and the tavis rose. And Meshitim B'chayzeh, here 60 cities. So we have Shishim Hema Malachais, we have Shishim Gibayrim, and over here we have Shitim B'chayzeh Zeremez al Shishim Oisiyah Shebebirchas Kehanim. This is the 60 letters in Birchas Kehanim, Shem Biyad Tzaddik, and that's the blessing of the Tzaddik, Moshe Kasov, Brachos, the Reish Tzaddik. These are the blessings that the Tzaddik is able to give a person. So a person comes, and a person is Shisha Hema Malachais, where they're connected to the Sitra Achra, and they need Shefa from Shemayim. That's Shishim Gibayrim, and it's all the result of their kirva to the Tzaddik, who is Barachos L'Reish Tzaddik, which is the aspect of the 60 letters of Birchos Kehanim, and through this, the Tzaddik is able to be Moira a derech. There is a derech, there is hope. Don't sink into hopelessness. There is infinite madrigas. You can be healed, you can be a Tzaddik, you can rise, you can be exalted, you can be a kohenig, you can bring our message of all of Klal Yisrael to the nations of the world, to other Yidden, to the nations of the world, and we should be zeicha to do that, and to be thereby a part of the Geula Shlema B'Karav B'Yameinu Be'ezras Hashem. Just a PSA, there's been a lot of requests that we should start this year earlier. We should start this year a little bit earlier because it's not so good that we run into, especially if we go overtime. We should be a buffer zone, and also people should have time to be able to put on tefillin, be shavadas. We will be, I'm sorry if this is way crazy for people. It's a little bit of push, beginning at 6 o'clock. But Ezras Hashem, 15 minutes earlier, that we should go from 6 to 6:45. It might require just a little bit more effort, and we're going to make the announcement on the chat so everybody hears. And looking forward to be able to really blend our learning and our davening in an appropriate way tomorrow. But Ezras Hashem.
מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני